Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your day at WELU so far. A lot of excitement already, and certainly a lot more still to come. So thank you very much for spending your day with us today. We really do appreciate that. And a special thank you to all of you who participated in our 2023 WELU Flash Poll. The goal of this undertaking was to get some unique perspective on the collective thinking of HR as we head into another new year. And as every new year brings to us, we know that there'll be a lot of new laws and new considerations on a federal, a state, and a local level, and all sorts of exciting things that we need to plan for and get familiar with. So we wanted to kind of dig a little bit into what your thinking was on this and what you consider to be your biggest challenges and perhaps a little bit about your opportunities as well heading into 2024. And you guys definitely came through. So thank you for that. We had a total of 143 responses on the flash poll. Interestingly, of the 143, 100% are in a role relating to human resources one way or another. Over 2/3, 69%, are dedicated HR professionals, and then the remainder, about 31%, are in a hybrid role involving HR and other functions as well. Interestingly, 100% of the companies represented by the individuals that participated in the poll do have employees in California. Nice to know, though, that close to half of those 47% have employees in multiple states, and 16% have international employees. So we have a good range of companies in terms of the types of issues that you're dealing with, particularly from a compliance standpoint, with both California and other states as well. And then when we look at the size of the companies that are represented by those responding, right about 50% have 250 or more employees. We can see that 25% have over 500 employees, and another 24% have 250 to 500 employees. And then the balance being at 27% with 100 to 249 employees. And then with the under 100 employees, we have about 25% represented by that group as well. So a good range. And when you think about it, what does that mean? It means we have some people responding to the poll who are probably an HR department of one, and everything falls to them. So they see all the possible issues. And then a large group that works with probably within a segmented HR department and might have specialized responsibilities. Happy to know also that we have 15 different industries represented by those participating in the poll, led by, not shocking, knowing who we are and what our legacy is, that the manufacturing, health, education, and professional services. So we get a very, very widespread perspective from our participants. So again, thank you so much for all of you who did participate. What are the key things that we found in this poll? Well, shocking, isn't it, when we have 100% in HR? Complying with federal, state, and local employment laws will be the biggest challenge for HR professionals in 2024. But let's not put too much on that, because there are a lot of major issues that we're dealing with here relating to employees. So finding good employees is going to continue to be a major concern for HR in 2024. And then keeping those employees happy through competitive and fair pay is a major priority as well. And I want to focus a little bit on that fair pay issue, because that's going to pop up a little bit as we go through the actual results. A couple of things that we're seeing a little less of this year that are fading a little bit more into the background, perhaps. Remote versus on-site seems to be a little bit more in the rearview mirror. In other words, most of those decisions have been made. Most of that has been done. Probably the bulk of that challenge happened in 2021 and maybe 2022, but we're not seeing a lot of it projected moving forward into 2024. Doesn't mean it was easy. It just means that we're not seeing that as quite much of a top of mind concern. But then a few other things like workplace security and union concern have not quite become top concerns just yet. And I am a little curious to see what how thought thinking might change based on our program today and some of the stuff that we're talking about here today. Happy to say also that there are some positives as we head towards 2024. So a few areas of optimism expressed by the 143 who took part in our poll. I look forward to sharing that with you. So the first question that we asked, and this was really our key question, and we found that taking care of employees compliantly is the biggest concern. So the poll question was looking ahead to 2024, what are the biggest workplace concerns you expect your organization to face? We asked you to rate these three different ways, either as a major concern, a minor concern, or an insignificant concern. And what we found that was while staying compliant is the top concern, developing, paying competitively, and therefore retaining employees are all big concerns. The remote workforce considerations, again, and union concerns are lagging behind the more day-to-day issues, the things that we actually have to address every day as seen by staying compliant and dealing with maintaining that workforce and bringing in that workforce. We did have a few other suggestions written in. A lot of them kind of corresponded with things we already had there, and that's often the case. A lot of them were in the compliance area and wage and hour issues. AI popped up, which is always nice to see, productivity. And then one that we didn't see a lot of, but I think is probably bubbling under and maybe hidden in a few of these others, is mental health concerns. So looking at the actual responses that we had on this, you'll see that staying compliant with federal, state, and local employment laws as a major concern was the top vote getter, but right up there, really neck and neck, we've got four areas. So staying compliant, effectively developing employees to be successful. That means we have these employees, they are our employees, now we have to develop them. How do we interpret that? Can go different directions, and that probably is fodder for another poll. When we've done polls on this in the past, we find that usually this relates to things like training, leadership training, succession planning. So really developing employees and giving them opportunities to stay with the organization and growing. Of course, as we see in number 3, paying employees competitively relative to market is important, but that's part of developing the employee, right? We want to make sure that they have a pay structure that's going to continue to keep them motivated, because the top 3 areas, staying compliant, developing employees to be successful, and paying them competitively, what does that equal? It equals retaining good employees. So it's kind of logical when we see those top 4. I don't think there's any real breaking news in any of those. That we're looking to stay compliant because we're HR, and we're looking to really develop our employees. And interestingly, so those are the 4 that came in above 60%. Then we drop down a bit and we get to things like recruiting and hiring that are still up there very high. And you can see that as a major concern and a minor concern, over 90%, about 91% identify that as a concern. So it definitely is a major concern, but it looks like our bigger goals are to work with what we have and take good care of the people that we have, and perhaps then have less to deal with on the recruiting and hiring side. And then I said, keep an eye out on the internal pay equity issues, because there we can see that although it's not right up there at the top as a major concern, when we combine major and minor concern, we see that 89%. So almost 9 out of every 10 do identify that as a concern. So it's starting to I think move up a little bit more. And then as we get down towards the where we're not seeing expression of concern as much, understanding the causes of union organizing campaigns, fewer than 10%, and notice that 61% said it's an insignificant concern. And similarly, bringing remote employees back to the workplace probably already played out, which is probably why it's not quite as big a concern right now. One of the things we were very curious about heading into today, based on some of the questions that we get through our helpline and areas of concern, is the new cannabis laws. We know in California and other states as well, there are some new laws that are going to change things, but it's not registering as a major concern for as many employers or HR professionals, at least as we expected. And again, that's something that we'll be talking about throughout the day here at WELU. So hopefully you'll get the information you need, and hopefully it will put you in a comfortable place in terms of how you're going to work with that within your workplace. Another way that we look at this data on concerns is we ask you to rank your major concerns from top to bottom. So finding employees is actually the most, we call this intense concern, meaning we measure the intensity based on your major concerns. What is the most major of those concerns. We have you rank them from 1 to whatever number of major concerns you identified. So what we found there is compliance is second. So remember, it was first as far as a major concern, but when we look at as the number one concern, it's second to finding good employees when we look at the intensity of the top concerns. And as really, when we look at the top three concerns, compliance and retention, they're really neck and neck behind recruiting and hiring. So it's kind of a repeat of what we saw in the first question, but we see it a little bit differently now in that when I have to find employees, that becomes a little bit more of an issue that brings out maybe perhaps a little bit more of a concern. And you can see that by a significant margin, recruiting and hiring is the most intense of the concerns. 55% versus under 37% for staying compliant with federal, state, and local employment laws. So it flips the script a little bit on that. We look at that as the most intense of the concerns. But then also a couple of interesting things when we look towards the bottom and what are not registering as major concerns. Our helpline fields more calls on leaves of absence than any other topic by far, yet 0% named as their number one concern, recognizing the need for accommodations and leaves. Now, we know that there are always, every year, this year being no exception, changes to our leave laws and new areas of consideration for us. But it looks like we're ready to handle that. We're probably used to it by now. We've dealt with it enough. And then also nobody identified union campaigning as their number one concern, or offering competitive employee benefits, or bringing remote employees back to the workforce, or internal pay equity. I want to point out on the pay equity, I mentioned that we'll look at that a little bit. Notice that while nobody had that as their number one, as we look at the number 2 and the number 3 ranked concern, we're getting close to 50%. Are ranking that, so about 47% are ranking that as either their number 2 or their number 3 concern. So again, we're seeing the pay equity issue start to rise a little bit as a concern. I mentioned that there'll be some optimistic news and some things that we're kind of happy to be able to report back on. And that one of those is employee counts. Well, we think this is good news, that employee counts are projected to rise in 2024 based on the responses to our flash poll. The question was, do you expect your employee count in 2024 to increase or decrease? Is what we were asking here. And by a margin of 9-1, respondents project increases to employee counts in 2024. And the decreases, though they're not heavily anticipated, there could be some significance. So you see a little bit of the have and have nots here when we look at this. So anytime we ask this question, typically the majority will say, oh, we expect them to stay about the same. So in this case, we had about 54% projecting their employee count should stay about the same. But notice the increases versus the decrease. So those that project an increase of up to 10%, we're at about 26% of those. And by more than 10%, we have over 6%. So we put those two together, do a little quick math, and we're at a little bit over 33%, 32% in terms of those projecting an increase. And then we look at the decreases, and it's a little under 5%. So that's kind of where we get the math on that. So about 4.6% that are projecting a decrease. But we do find it interesting that those projecting a decrease of more than 10% is the majority of those anticipating a decrease. So it tells us that while most of us are not projecting decreases, those that are, we expect that it could be significant. So overall positive news, but there's a little bit of a caution there too for a segment of the employers that we're hearing from in this poll. Now, we know it's overall positive that we're going to expect to see an increase in employee counts. Not only that, but those that are going to be with us can expect higher pay. So one of the questions was in 2024, do you expect to provide pay increases for? And then we gave you choices of different segments of your employee population. And so not only do we expect that employers are going to share the love and the dough, they will be sharing the dough as well, as pay increases in 2024 will not just be the result of minimum wage increases. We've heard that for a long time with the minimum wage increases in California and numerous other states. and the increase in the federal pay salary threshold, there was an expectation that most of our increases would kind of be based on the statutory requirements. But no, we found it to really be more across the board. And we'll see here a little bit more of the impact of pay equity initiatives materializing a little bit more too. So who is going to be getting these increases based on our poll? Well, almost 1/3, just about 30%, said we're giving increases to all employees across the board. Everybody's going to get an increase in 2024. Pretty encouraging. That's a little bit better than average. And then when we segment that a little bit for those that said, well, not everybody, but here are the groups that will be getting pay increases. About equal number projected that they would be providing increases, obviously, for those impacted by minimum wage. So we know between all employees and those impacted by minimum wage that there will have to be increases there. Cost of living, again, more of a traditional increase that we see on a year-by-year basis. But here's where it gets interesting: is about 12% are now singling out pay equity adjustments. So that means that, as our pay equity laws and our reporting in California and on a federal level, and obviously for government contractors for many years now, as that's becoming more of a front and center issue, we're seeing more employers going back and saying, hey, I need to really look at this and I need to actually make adjustments now. I've spent time looking at it now. I really need to make sure I'm doing something about it. So it is kind of interesting that we're seeing a little bit more on the pay equity side. And then we do have about 11% are still unsure, and we still have about 3 weeks, a little more than 3 weeks to get that figured out if we want them effective as of January. So some are still figuring it out. And then as we get into the specific employee groups, high performing employees, so pay for performance, we're seeing a little bit more on the pay for performance side this year. And again, that's going to be cyclical. Sometimes we'll see pay for performance being all the rage. Other times it's just more about staying equitable to market. But seeing the high performing employees get close to 10% indicates, at least within this group, that we're seeing a little bit more of a focus on pay for performance. And then smaller segments under 4% and below for managers and supervisors or executives, and still a few that are going to single out on-site employees, perhaps versus remote employees. Good news is also that we see that about 30% are providing it to everybody. Who's providing pay increases to nobody? Nobody. So 0% said that no employees will be getting pay increases in 2024. So again, more on the positive side there. What are the pay increases going to look like? Well, we're getting a little bit more traditional. For those that will be receiving pay increases, do you expect the increases to average what? And we gave you a few choices here. And while the pay increases are certainly much more common than they've been lately, we do see that they're more in line with pre-pandemic levels, with only a scarce few projecting above 5% across the board on the increases. Many of you probably heard the stories and the anecdotes over the last few years with increases kind of being random and very significant. And some of the stories, even large national polling firms that do their annual surveys of compensation were having to reopen their surveys because the increases were coming so rapidly. So by the time they had collected and analyzed and were ready to publish their data from a couple months back, it was already time to update it. So we're seeing now, based at least upon our results, that the pay increases are a little bit more on the traditional side, between 3% and 5%. And what do we usually see? It's somewhere in that 2% to 3% range. So we're back to there, maybe a little bit ahead of normal, since we're going from 3% to 5%. There is where the majority are. Still close to 10% that are going to be less than 3%. But interesting to see that fewer than 2% are projecting increases above 5%. In other words, very few are expecting that they're going to be as the increases are going to be as in demand as they had been just a year or two back, like we were seeing in 2021 and 2022. So thank you again for everybody who did participate in this poll. Couple of things to consider as you think about this and you think to where you are right now as an organization and how you fit into this and how you incorporate the things you're learning today at WELU. Consider the results of this poll in relation to some of the insights being provided by today's presenters. To what extent is it aligned? I see some areas where it is aligned. I see some areas where it's not aligned, and in particular, on some of the issues relative to unions, and definitely we're not seeing a lot of interest there, and some issues relative to leaves of absence. So take a look at that and see what your thoughts are, and then think about how you answered. For those of you that did participate in our poll, would you change any of your responses based on what you're learning here today at WELU? So just a few things to consider. Thank you for spending your lunchtime, if you're using this time, your lunchtime today to view this review. Appreciate it. All of us here at Employers Group and Everything HR, thank you for being part of our WELU today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.